So we've got Ian turned to a trusted development team who graduated from Mr. Chips and Trailblazer and he became Magnetic Fields. Why the name change?
Well, we thought Mr. Chips software was a terrible name. We wanted something a bit more sophisticated. It's as simple as that, really.
That was it? Yeah. Was there any inspiration behind Magnetic Fields, or was it just...
I think we wanted to do Jean-Michel Jarre at the time, so it came from the name of one of his albums.
Oh, right. Yeah. There you go. Cool. And we've got a little slide here of Lotus. Andy and Sean didn't let him down. Taking his influences from the classic split-screen racing of Pit 2. It's a classic game that redefined the pseudo-simulation racing game. The 3D is quick, the controls are linear, and the computer components vary in smartness, if you will. Lotus is rumored to take over 9 months to develop, is that right?
Yeah, I think we spent the best part of a year developing it. I started a few weeks before Sean joined me on it. We were working on a shooting game, and it wasn't really going that well, so I was designing a 2-player car racing game in the background, doing the graphics, working out how it would work. And I eventually convinced Sean to come on board with it, and I remember him saying, if you could do a convincing, fast road routine, that would form the basis of the game, then we would do it. So he went away one weekend, came back on Monday, and he'd got the road working, and then that went on to become Lotus. But originally it was with, we had Porsches in it, and all the graphics were Porsches, including the front end. Then we took it to Gremlin, and Ian had just acquired the license with Lotus, so I had to redraw all the graphics again. The game was essentially the same, it didn't really change, but it was just changing all the graphics from a Porsche to a Lotus.
Did it take quite a long time to do that then, in terms of redrawing it?
I worked a lot of evenings and weekends to get that done. Yeah. The subsequent games were quicker, but it was the best part of the year working on that. I think we took. I think it was only 6 months on the sequel. There's a lot of pressure to do the sequel. I think the sequel was at the time the most successful Gremlin game. Yeah. And then obviously we went on to do the third one as well.
I've got a quote here from Sean Southern here. Recently, he said it was quite recently interviewed, and it says, I remember meeting a boss from Gremlin in his local pub one evening. I was with a friend who was helping us test a game, and I said it might be a little early. We might be a little early. The guy from Gremlin said, "No problem, have a drink, but at my time." So we got there ridiculously early as the pub opened at noon, and by the time the guy at Gremlin arrived, we were completely drunk and run him up a huge bill. But luckily he didn't moan all that much. Is that true?
Oh, I never joined on the pub. I didn't drink. I've never drunk. I would always just stay in the office working while they went to the pub.
That's great. We've got a little movie actually on the Fizz movie. Let's have a look if it's going to work. Yay, more technology! Ah well, so we've got a Fizz movie there, which contained on-scene footage for the Lotus promotional material. But in the interest of time, we'll move on to 1991. And it starts with the demise of the 8-bit market, with Amiga sales outstripping the Commodore 64 for the first time. Gremlin bucked this trend, sometimes under pressure from magazine petitions to bring some of the conversions from 16-bit titles back to the 8-bit platforms, noticeably Switchblade, Toyota Celica GT Rally and Shadow of the Beast, that would appear for Ardent Spectrum and Amstrad fans. We've also got a video here, because at the time you've got Andrew and Sean decided to continue the Lotus series, as we said here, with Lotus 2, which is just, should be here. Yeah, there we go. I mean, do you think this was the best of the Lotus trilogy in your opinion?
I think it was the favourite. A lot of people liked it. My favourite was always the last one because it was the best of both games. We just put everything in and everything else we could think of on top of that. But I think generally people like the second one best. I think, yeah.
It seems to be consensus from what we've been finding out is that Lotus 2 is just.
Yeah, I think the only real problem with Lotus 3 was that we tried to do too much and it ran a little bit too slowly at times. But yeah, they all had their own merits.
Yeah. super, and that brings us nicely on to Supercars 2 as well. Remember this one, guys. Magnetic Fields, another sequel to a 1991 gen. Supercars 2 builds upon the original but offered a two-player mode and a heavily updated power-up system. So, I mean, the output from Magnetic Fields is quite prolific at the time. We've got Lotus 2 and Supercars 2 making to market in a short space of time. Did you guys find that the original engines could be sort of tweaked and used in each other's games so to bring them out quickly? Or was the case of engine was...
I don't think we were that efficient, really. We were always redrawing things or rewriting things, and Sean was a bit of a perfectionist with the code. So I don't think there was anything from the original Supercars that we carried over. I think we just redid everything for Supercars 2. There was actually a PC version of it, which is another update of Supercars 2 that we called Supercars International, and that was just an update. That fixed all the problems that we thought were in Supercars 2.
Okay. I mean, that's a general question for the whole panel here. I mean, how did you guys find the transition sort of from 8-bit machines to 16-bit? Was it a big jump for you guys? Was it just a natural progression?
Commodore got a 16-bit one, so I'm happy to jump on the back of that anyway. So playing with the Amiga was fun.
You went to 3 weeks coding?
No, it took a bit longer, mate.
Any other stories from you guys?
I was enjoying Commodore hardware, put into pieces. So what can it actually do? The document says it can do this, but if you try hard enough, it'll make it do this instead.
Do something else instead.
It's far more fun.
Did you guys all find that then? Obviously you've got a lot for yourself. Do you ever were you coding as well at the time?
Yeah, we did a lot on 16-bit, but Peter was the hardware man, really. I mean, he knew, what he didn't know about the Amiga weren't worth knowing. And I just concentrated on the actual game code and stuff, and Pete did all the hardware tricks with the Amiga, and it was brilliant, really.
It was fun, though.
Dear. We'll move on. We've got a load of things on Switchblade, but we're going to switch straight to Premier Manager. First football management game sim, cashing in on a new cash cow, the Premier League. Anyone lose lots of hours to this? No? Okay. Alright, moving on then. So we've got Zool as well. Any good members of Zool, guys? All looking blankly?
Yeah, very fond memories. It's my favourite character.
Was your favourite character? Was it one of your favourite games to do then?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. It was. I think it was our answer. The Amiga needed a character-based game to compete with Sonic and Mario, and that's what we set out to do, and built the Zool world around it, or the Nth Dimension as it was known as.
Absolutely awesome game, I used to love this. And you notice that's an early demo because it doesn't involve the Chumma Chups. I mean, was that, was that a planned thing to actually work with the confectionery brand from the start, or did they approach you?
No, we approached them.
You approached them?
Yeah, I had investment in dentists at the time, and I thought it would be a good idea.
Yeah, because it says here, in 2013, the Wide magazine listed Zool as one of the 12 games that existed purely just to sell junk food. Have you heard that quote?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, that was last year. So, any comments from those guys, or is it just a case of...
Not that I repeat in public.
Fair enough. Okay. Moving on to Nigel Mansell. Another video on YouTube here. See if we can get that up for you.
To go back a couple of years, when we first thought, shall we do a racing game? We knew racing games were very popular, and we thought we had the expertise and the programming skills to do a very good racing game. So we said, yeah, let's do a racing game. The next question we asked ourselves, is there a personality? Is there an endorsement we can add to the game that's going to make it even more exciting? We knew Nigel Mansell was doing well in the World Championship at that time. He wasn't World Champion at that time, but we thought he might be. And we started speaking to him. Would he be interested in helping us with our game? He was very interested. He likes computer games, he takes a Game Boy with him wherever he goes, and soon we had Nigel on board as well. So we were there. We knew we were doing a Nigel Mansell racing game. What we're going to do now is James is going to take us around the building and show us how from that point did we develop the game.
Okay, now we've decided to go ahead and produce the Maxwell game. We've actually done all the design work. The next stage is to start the programming. We have the computer in which the code's being written. The code that we write ends up in that box over there. That box is our version of the Super Nintendo. It's similar to the one you would have at home, except that what it allows us to do is continually change the program that's working. So this is what's in the cartridge. That code there on that screen translates into this on your Super Nintendo. This is actually the original road that's used in the Nigel Mansell game. The game is nowhere near complete, but we have the actual basic road. When we were developing the Nigel Mansell game, the road was the most important thing. You've got a smooth and fast road system, particularly with something like the Grand Prix game. To get this far took us, probably about 6 or 7 months of programming. The next stage was producing the car graphics, the roadside objects, backdrops, all the other support graphics for the game. And that's what we're going to show you next. Everything that you see in the game will at some point have to be drawn. We actually have to draw the car with every wheel position to add realism to the actual game itself. As well as drawing Nigel's car, we have to draw the cars that you're going to be competing against in the game. Could you run the animation there? This is so we can, in the game, we can actually give the impression of a car moving away from you, or you moving up behind another car. How many frames did it take to do that?
We originally used 8 frames, but I doubled them up to 16 to make it smooth.
It works really well. The game isn't just about racing down the tracks though. Another important part of the game is the actual selection and setting up of the car between each of the individual tracks in the game. In this section you can select your tyres, change the airfoil settings, etc. Below we also see some graphics for the sponsors which we're adding to the car graphics. Anything for realism. Whilst the rest of the team are working on the programming and finishing off the graphics for our game, here in the studio, Pat's working on the music and sound effects. Could you have a listen to some of the music please, Pat?
Once I've composed the music, it's built with tracks, similar to this.
Okay, could you listen to a sound effect now please, Pat? In an effort to create as much realism as possible, we asked Bonnell to...
So in the interest of time, we're going to stop on that there. So check that down on YouTube. Basically shows young James Northburn, now CEO of Foundation 9, and ended up over at Sumo Digital right now. But it's quite a good list to check that out. I was going to ask you guys about that, but I'm going to try and just get to the Q&A session. Look back to a few more sequels. So Zool gets a female companion in Zool 2. Premier Manager has a second incarnation, and that will be the Lotus trilogy of season 32. So, question for the panel and Ian as well. I mean, what's the reason here for there was a slowdown in sort of quantity of titles? Was it a case of spiralling budgets and larger teams and things like that? It took long to code the 16 bits?
Larger teams, larger products. That was just the nature of the beast at the time, and it's still the same now.
As it gets more sophisticated.
Yeah. Bigger teams. Whilst some products did take 2 years at that time, but that was small teams working for a long period. But now you've got big teams working for a long period.
Yeah, so just like that. Do you think it's just going to be continuing on then? So is that just the case then? It's just as technology develops, it just takes longer with that basic idea?
Well, that's what's happening in the video game market. Yeah, obviously in the sort of mobile market, etc., it's somewhat different. But in the video game market, you've got to have lots more artists working on products that will play on the PS4, etc.
Fair enough. Okay. Moving on to 1995, and we've got a video which we may skip. I can't remember how long this is, but it brings us on to actual Saga 1995. And for the first, obviously this actual Saga had a significant investment in technology and mocap. But perhaps one of the biggest investments in this technology in Europe, is that right?
From a software, a video game market, yeah. I think we had about the biggest mocap studio.
Was that kind of exciting at the time, the fact that you're bringing these things in, this technology in? Was it actively developed at the time?
Yeah, it was very exciting. We made a commitment to spending a lot of money on the capture cameras, etc. And I think it paid off at the end of the day.
Yeah, so good stuff coming out. For the audience, obviously, there's a really nice making of video for the PlayStation on YouTube that shows how this technology up. So go off and search for that, but we're going to skip that for this one because obviously we're running over. Brings us on to 1996. And the history of the Gremlins on our panels drawing to a close. So, following the years are anecdotal but interesting. So, we've got Actua and more Premier Manager, and more excitement will come in from which is Gremlin bought DMA Design. Impressed with DMA because they use the same graphics engine as in Clan Wars and Wild Metal Counting, and he wanted a collaboration. We thought they were a first-class resource to invest in, and R&D teams worked very closely for a time with several tips going backwards and forwards between Sheffield and Dundee. Did you have the stories from around this time at all?
No, it was an important time for the group. It was whilst we were shaping the business to float it on the stock exchange, and part of that process was building up our development resources. And Dave Jones up at DMA had a great reputation for delivering fantastic product, and it was a great addition to the business. And when we acquired them, they were sort of halfway through the first version of Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, that's what we're getting a quick picture of that up on here as well. Because we've got Race and Chase. We've got here the early stages of Race and Chase. There've been no stills in the City version of the Mega franchise. Rights have been sold, but they could be part of this acquisition. Is that right? I mean, has Sheffield been the home of Grand Theft Auto?
No, it was already sold to Bertelsmann.
Just before you got
Yeah.
got there.
So we knew that anyway. So.
Fair enough. That would have been cool though, wouldn't it? It's like a GTA redeveloped to Sheffield, isn't it? Given how the franchise is right now.
Yeah. It may not have happened though.
True that. And there's GTA right there. Dave Jones there. Love the picture of Dave Jones up there. So someone that's excited Ian about the acquisition of DMA. Dave Jones, the founder of DMA, and often referred to as a Spielberg and Gaiman joined Gremlin as a creative director. He did oversee development of some of the most appealing titles in DMA's history. One had proven controversial quite early on, and that was not on here. Well, it was Body Harvest basically. Do you remember Body Harvest?
Yeah, it was a Nintendo 64 title.
Yeah.
It was actually originally it was supposed to be a Nintendo first-party product.
Yeah, back it was Ultra 64 when it was being developed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And became the N64. So Nintendo dropped DMA and the game for being too violent. Is that, or at least they tried to, according to this. Is that?
Sorry,
So apparently, Nintendo apparently tried to drop DMA and Body Harvest because they thought it was too violent at the time. Is that right?
It didn't quite fit in with their portfolio products. They were probably right to do that.
Yeah, there's some problems out there, Robert, isn't there? You can guess.
think your sandwich is ready.
I think it is. So I think there's some ROMs, isn't there, of Body Harvest that you can get hold of even now. So.
Probably.
Probably. Okay, moving on to 1997 then. So we've got a record profit of 3.3 million during 1997 and a record turnover. Oh, indeed. Sorry about that. We've got a record turnover because of that, and there's Body Harvest right there. Sorry about that, guys. So, we've got a few Gremlin actual sports and DMI titles, best of which is N2O. Body Harvest finally hits the shelves in November, perhaps a little bit too late. Spare game though, given the development time, probably ahead of its time, and the long gestation period showed through. Then we move on to 1999. Loads of things over there. Actually continued the third incarnation appears. Premier Manager 99 gives a nod. And in January, Electronic Arts and Bendy in France appeared to be corporate runners to buy Gremlin. And that's it really. We move on to Infograms in June. Shareholders of Gremlin Group UK accepts a bid of 40 million to acquire them by Infograms Entertainment Group. Ironically, they claim that one of Britain's greatest software houses solution. Infograms keeps the studio on various guys until 2003 when the doors closed for good. And out of the ashes, he informs a highly successful Sumo Digital, buys back the rights for the Gremlin IP from Atari, and brings back Bounder on iOS. 2012. He signs a deal with Funstar to release that IP, starting with Premier Manager. And Cal Cabers, Paul Porter, Darren Mills, and James Norfolk founded Sumo in 2003, which itself was acquired by Foundation Line Entertainment, and it's still going strong today. And that is pretty much history in a nutshell from what I can make out. Is there anything I've missed there, anything that needs mentioning at all?
Those last 5 years went quick, didn't they?
Yes.
They were all working on realms of the haunting.
Yes, we ran along. Is there any sort of major stories from that sort of? Obviously, it's quite short. I've had to go through it so we can get some Q&A sessions. Is there any sort of things that stick in your mind at all from that particular period?
Well, that quiet period you mentioned was when we were working on realms of the haunting. It was a 3-year project that one.
Oh yeah, so we've got that. Watching that, so realms of the haunting. I think it's German. When we came in to see the development of that, it was about 15 minutes long YouTube video. I would say they were interviewing you guys about it, and that was very interesting. Yeah, remember that very short.
You also mentioned Sumo as you're going to be on now, so we're actually at Sumo.
Sorry?
We're at Sumo now, so I work for Sumo.
And that takes it to the
heckling from the back.
And that's the moment for the Gremlins there. Sorry for the technical things there, but we've got a Q&A session now, guys. But before that, can we get a round of applause for the Sorry, I had to skip through that quite quickly there, guys. Has anyone got any questions for the guys? Anything you want to ask? Stick your hands up and give a microphone to you. Yeah, got one over here.
Well, there's 2 questions really. What is your favourite game that you've worked on, each of you, in your career, and what are you working on now?
Favourite game was probably Captive. It's a game I love, a game called Dungeon Master. I fell in love with that game and I wanted to write my own version, so I did. My latest game I can't mention, so sorry about that.
My latest game is Tony's latest game, so I still can't mention it. but Monty on the Run was my favourite.
Give us something.
Nope. Again.
It's only my last game. Especially Monsters.
Tell me else. Alright, give us one word to describe the game that doesn't give too much away.
If I say something wrong, I'll get sued, or I might even lose my job. So. I can't. So.
Yeah, go for it. Anyone else? Hands up, questions? Nobody? Nobody's going.
It's Tom. What is the key difference to developing today to 20, 30 years ago? You talk about spiralling costs, but if you were going to produce an iOS game today, which on the surface seems like a simple thing to do, yet it's not, because it takes years. You look at these games like Fez or whatever that take forever, or they're PC games, that take forever to develop. What is the key, big difference, the big time sink now in a game?
I found that it's the PC product, but what we normally do is we do the engine on a PC and the console, and we develop on a PC, and then it just works on the console. And if you develop like that, they're the easiest ones. As soon as you go to the console, the rest is a pain. Usually better for profiling consoles, but that's about it. So PC is the best one. But they don't, as far as I know, I've only done one PC game, and that was Realms of the Haunted, and I'll never do that again. So I did a game called Wacky Racers on Dreamcast, and we had a PC version for development. Never got released, it was just used for development.
Key difference I find is that it's no longer really possible to, even up the iOS and mobile devices, it's no longer possible to do everything yourself, to the audio, the graphics, the artwork, the coding. So you now really do have to have a very talented group of people around you to get anything decent done.
I've got nothing to add to that.
Any more questions from anyone?
I was going to add one more thing. I did enjoy working on a Dreamcast. The problem with that one was it was pirated to hell, so we didn't get anybody to release the product on it.
Was that the main problem with the Dreamcast though? Do you think that was part of its downfall, the fact that it was just so easy to cheat?
I don't know, I remember when we did Wacky Racers, I remember that being the easiest to program and easiest to do everything with. They gave us a system called Katana before the early days, and the SDK was absolutely rubbish. So I went off and made my render twice as fast as the SDK.
And finally, from me, no one writes in assembler anymore. I miss that.
I did a bit on PS2, rendering on that one, but that was hard work.
Yeah, but what was each of you down the line, which was your favourite Gremlin game that you ever worked on?
I've already told you, it's my favourite game of all time, so it's Monty on the Run.
It has to be Realms of the Haunted. It was actually a really good experience.
Probably Lotus 3.
Lotus 3.
I liked all the ones that made money. The one closest to my heart is Zool, and closely followed by Thing on a Screw.
Amazing games. Well, that's it. Any more questions, guys? Well, that's it. Thank you for coming up, guys, and give it off to the Gremlins for So later on, if you check your website, planner, should I say, we have got the guys doing some sign-ins in the first hall on the left as you come in at the back corner there. I'll get Andy to do an announcement on the tannoy, but for now, go and have a pint. You're welcome. If anyone wants to hang around for the next talk, that's in about 10 minutes' time. Thank you.